I'm Becki Lawson, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the threat that disease can pose to wildlife populations and biodiversity. When we're talking about disease, it's important that we understand that that covers both infectious and non-infectious conditions. So infectious diseases can be caused by a wide variety of agents, and they include bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, and prions. Non-infectious diseases are sometimes less often considered, but they can be caused by things such as trauma, pollution, poisoning, cancer, and genetic conditions. Disease is a natural phenomenon in wildlife, just as it is in humans, in livestock, and in our pet animals. And as wildlife health professionals, it's important that we realise that our aim isn't to eliminate or eradicate disease in wildlife. Instead, we monitor and investigate disease so we can fully understand the endemic or the background patterns of the conditions that affect them. And when we have this understanding, we're in a good position to be able to rapidly identify new and emerging threats when they occur, to investigate them, and to determine how we need to act. When we identify an infection in wildlife, it's important that we understand its significance to the animal. Is it a cause of disease or ill health, perhaps sufficiently severe to lead to its death? Or is it carried without causing apparent harm? So sometimes wildlife can act as reservoirs or sources of infection that can cause ill health in humans, in livestock, or in companion animals. And it's critically important that we understand this interrelationship, the interface between the health of people, of captive, and of wild animals, if we're to safeguard their health and that of the wider ecosystem. You may well have heard in the media the term emerging infectious disease, used to describe conditions affecting humans such as SARS, West Nile fever, and Ebola virus disease. So these diseases can be caused by novel agents, which we've not previously encountered, but they can also be caused by known agents that are causing a problem in new species or in new areas of the world, or they may simply be affecting increasing numbers of individuals. The threat from emerging infectious diseases has become increasingly important, and it's critical that we understand the drivers of disease emergence. Why do these events occur? And to understand particularly if they are the result of human activity. Some of the most catastrophic disease outbreaks have occurred when an infection has been introduced into a new geographical region, be it an island or a different continent. When that happens, the wildlife species may not have previously encountered that infection, and so they have no natural immunity to it. In the past, conservationists have tended to focus their attention on causes of wildlife declines such as habitat loss, lack of resources, for example food, or overexploitation. It's only in recent decades that disease has been considered as an additional factor. There are multiple examples where disease is known to pose a threat to isolated populations of wild animals, for example those that occur in islands, and also to critically endangered species for which there are very few remaining individuals. However, disease can also cause significant declines of previously common wildlife species over a wide geographical region within a short time frame. A chytrid fungus, called Batrachochytrium, dendrobatidis, can cause a potentially fatal skin disease in multiple species of amphibian. Since at least the 1980s, it's caused epidemic mortality, species declines, and even extinctions of amphibians, particularly in Australia and in the Americas. And whilst the origin of this chytrid fungus isn't clear, it's likely to have been introduced to these regions recently, and it's possible, at least in part, that human activity moving amphibians around the world with trade has been responsible for its spread. An important example of a non-infectious disease which has posed a threat to a wildlife species is the decline of vultures that has occurred in South Asia in the 1990s. scientists at the time investigated and found evidence of severe kidney disease. They discovered that a licensed veterinary drug called diclofenac that was used to treat cattle and buffalo was in fact highly toxic to the vultures. And when the birds scavenged carcasses of animals that had been treated with that drug, they were exposed to potentially fatal levels. And so the local governments have made it illegal to treat animals with this drug, and instead they recommend vulture-safe alternatives. And the conservation communities have set up multiple captive breeding centres for these once very common vulture species in an effort to increase their numbers. And there are now indeed signs of some of the populations recovering in the wild. So we've seen that both infectious and non-infectious diseases can pose a threat to wildlife, and it's important that conservationists consider disease when they're investigating wildlife declines. Now, put what you've learned into practice with our quick learning check, and then we'll hear about how climate change is rapidly becoming one of the greatest threats to life on Earth.